this is the great opportunity for the Democratic Party to step up. And this is where we're completely failing the country right now. So 3 of the last 7 or 8 town halls I've had have all been in Ronnie Jackson's district. He's a far-right congressman in Texas. So I mentioned Amarillo.
Doctor I've dealt with before.
Amarillo, Denton, and Wichita Falls. In Amarillo, they're talking about the fact that they had to turn around 13 trucks, 18-wheelers full of food for their food bank because Trump cut the USDA supplemental that was passed under Biden. People are going to go hungry in Amarillo. They're shutting down 3 of the public schools in the Amarillo ISD because of cuts to Title I and what's happening at the state level. Up in Dalhart, Texas, further north, they care about their local schools. They care about unions because it's a big rail hub. And they care about immigration, and they want more immigrants because they're an agricultural community. And no matter what they pay there to anybody born in Dalhart, Texas, they're not taking the jobs. If we cannot figure out immigration better than what Trump is doing right now, that town will wither and die on the vine. There is no Democrat on the ballot making the other side of the argument on issues that we should absolutely fucking own every single day. And so if we continue to concentrate the presidential election in 7 battleground states and leave Alabama and Texas to their own devices, if in Texas we only focus on the top of the ticket against John Cornyn or Ken Paxton, which is important, but neglect the state house races or the U.S. congressional races like the one against Ronnie Jackson, we're going to keep getting this. And we can never blame the people in Amarillo for either voting for Ronnie Jackson because he has no opponent or just not voting at all because they don't really have a choice. And so I recognize, John, that just saying this, that the proposition is extraordinarily expensive, and it will force us to use muscles that we have not employed since Lyndon Johnson was crisscrossing the state. But if we don't become a truly national party and a party that can talk and listen to people, I think more importantly in rural Texas as well as urban Texas, then we will be consigned to irrelevancy. And we will fuck up this moment. And this is, in that litany that Johnson described, as it was in Lexington and Concord all the way up to Selma, so it is today in 2025. And we have got to come through, because if we don't, I think you really do lose the last best hope of Earth. I think this thing is gone. And the outright corruption and criminality and total disregard for the law that we're seeing from Donald Trump himself and from those around him leads me to believe that they think this thing is already gone, that they're not going to face accountability or voters or free and fair elections. And I don't think that's the wrong logic for them to employ, given where we are and given how feckless so far and weak the opposition has been. So I sure hope that those who have the positions of power within our party, the money, the titles, the influence, will follow the lead of those students in Tuscaloosa, of the people that we're listening to in Amarillo, and get after it and fight and dispense with this false choice of, do we need to be more progressive or more centrist and moderate? It's just, are we going to fight or are we going to surrender? And if we fail to fight, this thing's over.
Yeah, it's oftentimes it is a false choice on the ideological spectrum, just partly because voters have, as you know, very complicated views, and they can hold a view on one issue that's quite liberal and quite progressive, and a view on another issue that's conservative. Obviously, we can't take power, especially in the Senate, without winning states like Texas. We're going to have to win. I mean, I think to win the Senate in 26, Maine, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, we need to win a lot of really tough states.
Yeah.
And, part of it is showing up. Part of it is, and people in the party will make this argument, especially people who look at the data, who've run in these races, who've talked to these voters, that Democrats have positions as a national party that don't always line up with voters in some of these redder states. And the question is, do you moderate your views? Do you say, no, these are my views and you don't have to agree with me on everything, but maybe we agree on this? How do you navigate the fact that there just really are right of center voters on a whole host of issues in some of these states that we absolutely have to win to take back power?
Yeah. I just don't know, just to be honest in my ignorance, just how much those policy positions and your place on the political spectrum really matter for some of the reasons you set up earlier. The lack of information that many voters have, not because they're dumb or uninterested, but because we don't have common facts that we share that are delivered on 3 broadcast news channels or 1 daily newspaper or the evening paper if you lived in a town like El Paso 40 years ago that had both. And so folks are getting information, culturally or anecdotally or incidentally if they're getting it at all. And I further agree with your point that people are complex. They voted for Obama and they voted for Trump, and they're not inconsistent. It's not hypocritical for them. Each man was speaking to them in that moment where they really needed to see that change that Obama was promising, that change that Trump was heralding. And to further make my point, look at the shit that Trump is doing. Like what poll test would return the results like you need to advocate invading Greenland or taking on, Canada as a 51st state, or your HHS secretary after 2 kids have died of measles in a country that hadn't lost a child to that virus in 20 years is saying you shouldn't take medical advice from him or just take more vitamin A or just tough it out. Deeply unpopular stuff. That woman who owns the toy store in Amarillo, she's absolutely getting screwed by this guy and his total ineptitude. What he does have is what seems and appears and is sold to people as the courage of his convictions. No one's cooking this stuff up for him. The shit that's coming out of his mouth is the shit that was generated in his brain. And there's something in today's overly controlled, sanitized corporate politics that's just really exciting about someone who speaks their mind. It just almost never, ever happens. Like, we can name the people on one hand. I think Bernie Sanders is that way. I think AOC has that going for her. I mean, there's some people who really stand out. And so I guess from everything I just said, have the courage of your convictions. I think strength appeals to people far more than policy precision or your 10-point plan or just how far you've moderated your views to anticipate where they're going to be in November of 2026. When I was running for Senate in 2018 and we got so close to Ted Cruz and perhaps more importantly, helped 12 insurgent Democrats defeat 12 incumbent Republicans in the state House. Colin Allred defeats Pete Sessions. Lizzie Panel Fletcher wins in Southeast Texas. It was transformative for the state. That was not one on policy. They were like, this guy fucking shows up everywhere. He's working his ass off. He listens to me whether I'm wearing a Trump hat or a Hillary hat. He just does not care. He's going to fight for me. He knows where I live. He understands what's happening here in Sweetwater or Roscoe or Dallas for that matter. Nobody's written off. Nobody's taken for granted. So, of course, I'm biased based on experience, but I think that is the path forward. So whatever you believe, whatever you feel, let it show. Let it come through in real, honest-to-God human terms. And I guarantee you're going to have a better chance of connecting with that voter than using the message-tested, approved line that came out of D.C. or Austin, for that matter. People want to connect with people, so be a person.
What could elected Democrats be doing better right now, either in Congress or in the states?
So plenty of exceptions to this, and Bernie's a great exception. He's just getting out there and he's being with people. Tim Walz getting out there, being with people. AOC, lots of Chris Murphy I just saw, Ro Khanna, a lot of really, really great leaders right now. To show the other side of the party, Chuck Schumer saying, well, we just got to wait till this guy's approval numbers go below 40. We did it before and we're going to do it again. So we'll kind of rope-a-dope him. We'll vote for this CR, which essentially gave Trump and Musk a free hand with our tax dollars to do whatever they wished with them at this moment of constitutional crisis. That certainly cannot be the answer. And unfortunately, I think it appears, and who knows what's in their heads, there are too many Democrats who are waiting and watching to find out, which way the wind is going to blow. Like, what is the message of this moment? And I can sympathize with those Democrats who don't want to hold a town hall because they're asking themselves, well, what do I say? What's the answer? What's the silver bullet? People want the message, and I don't know what it is. You can be forgiven for not knowing what it is. I mean, this is ahistorical, unprecedented. We've never seen this before. But all the more reason for you to be with the people that you purportedly serve and represent and listen to them. They're going to have the answer. They're going to have the message. I guarantee you, listen to them. not the consultants, not the pollsters, not the data scientists. Those folks are important too, but really more at the margins than anywhere else. So, and that's what I'm hearing from folks. One of the questions I get no matter where I travel in the state or outside of the state is, where's the Democratic Party? Where are people? What the hell are you guys going to do? Who's fighting for me right now? This because you're an expert in messaging. The message is we fight for you. But the trick is you can't say that. You have to show that.
Yeah.
You can't
Let
say
her read in the stage directions
that's
from
right.
Democrats.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've come across any of the excerpts from Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson's new book, Original Sin, which is about Biden, his decision to run again, sort of decline and age-related issues. I'm thinking about it because you were just mentioning, Democrats have to listen to people. Clearly, the Biden folks were not listening to a whole bunch of voters, not just Democratic voters, but voters all across the country for a long time who didn't want him to run. And then, post-debate, trying to tell people that what they were seeing with their eyes wasn't real. To what extent do you think Democratic politicians and party officials have a credibility issue to fix with voters, due in part to everything that went on in 24?
Just to be clear, Biden should not have run again. And to be even more clear, he failed this country in the most important job that he had. In fact, the entire rationale for his presidency the first time and the rationale he tried to sell us on for his attempt to run for re-election. Only I can stop Donald Trump. And he failed to do that. And it's not just you and me, but our kids and grandkids and the generations that follow that might have to pay the price for this. We might very well lose, the greatest country that this world has ever known. And it might be in part because of the decision that Biden and those around him made to run for re-election instead of having an open primary where the greatest talent that the Democratic Party can muster could be on that stage to have a competition of ideas and track record and vision and really excite not just Democrats, but the people of this country who did want change. I mean, if anything was clear coming out of 2024, they wanted change. And to literally run the oldest guy who many people accurately, to your point, said, I just don't think he is capable of doing this. And I know that I saw the congresswoman and the congressman on CNN saying he's running circles around us in the briefing rooms behind closed doors. It doesn't add up with what I'm seeing with my own lying eyes. I think that credibility problem is going to persist up until when Democrats say we fucked up and we made a terrible mistake. And it didn't just hurt our ability to win election in a political campaign. It deeply and gravely, and perhaps we'll see irrevocably, harmed this country. And so, you and many others got out there and told the truth. And I don't think you did it in a crass or brazen or mean way. I think you said, hey, maybe we should have this conversation. And we're absolutely trashed for doing it. Others, I think, saw that, were concerned, but worried that, Biden's already out there. He's going. Am I going to hurt him and his chances and our ability to defeat Trump if I further weaken him? I was definitely hearing stuff like that. I supported, folks who were behind the uncommitted movement in Michigan, not because I wanted to hurt Biden or Kamala Harris, but because I just couldn't stand what was happening in Gaza. I didn't like America's complicity in that. I knew President Biden had the power to do something. And here were people, speaking of the civil rights and voting rights movement, who were peacefully, democratically, nonviolently protesting to get the president's attention, to give him the power to do the right thing. And when I spoke on behalf of those who were doing that in Michigan, and in the same breath saying, I want to defeat Donald Trump, and if Biden is our nominee, we should vote for him. The attacks were, you're undermining the president, you're weakening him in front of this election. Why don't you just shut up and stand with him? And if we're the world's greatest democracy, you never shut up and stand with anybody when they're wrong. And you always have to speak the truth. So grateful to you and others who did do that. I wish more of us had done more at that time. But the last thing that we can do is fail to learn from that and not be honest about Chuck Schumer right now, not be honest about other Democratic leaders who are failing us in this moment. The time to be polite and kind and respectful is over. Democrats, it seems, care far too much about being right and being polite than being in power. Republicans under Trump care about power and nothing else, not the Constitution, not the rule of law, not being nice to one another. We don't have to be so immoral or illegal or corrupt, but I think we have to be far more ruthless and real about power, or we'll never have it again.
Yeah, and whenever we talk about it now, people are like, "Oh, wait, you're still picking on Joe Biden, and let's just move forward." And you see a lot of Democratic politicians are like, "Let's move forward." And it's not only about Biden. I do think our party, we just talked about how reading polls too closely is bad. You get poll tested messages and all that shit. But knowing where the public is and trying to at least meet them where they are on issues, I do think is important. I think is an issue that our party has had over the last several years. And it's not just with Biden's age. It was like, hey, the economy's great and look at all the statistics, and people are feeling the price increases.
It's much worse in England and Europe. It's not so bad here in America.
Right.
So here's the comparative example that you need to pay attention to.
And you've lived this being on the border, which is like, oh, immigration is just an issue that Trump uses to win elections, and that people couldn't possibly be upset by, more migrants coming over the border than any time before. And look, you can imagine that people are still want to be generous and want to have more immigration in this country, but are worried that when you have so many migrants coming across the border in a community and it's stretching the public services in that community, that people are going to be upset by that, And I just think that we have to do a better job, like really finding out where people are. And even if we disagree with their policy solutions or we disagree with their positions, like figuring out a way to make sure that they feel seen and heard.
Absolutely. I spent a lot of time on the border for forever. I lived there, but going to other border communities like Eagle Pass in Maverick County. This is where Abbott has put these border buoys that are in the river that have razor wire. It's this like medieval torture death device that has led to far too many migrants losing their lives, mothers and young children. That's obviously the wrong way to do it. But when I listen to people in Maverick County, they're like, where's the president? Where is the party? Like, Beto, would you be okay if at 2 a.m. 20 people are walking through your backyard? You don't know who they are or where they came from or what they might do to you and your family. Is that cool with you? No, I wouldn't like that either. It sounds like you have a real problem here. Well, then where the hell are you guys? Quit telling us that everything is okay or that we're managing this through the asylum process or we just need to get comprehensive immigration reform done. So vote for me in the next election until we have a majority. And they know that we had a majority in both houses and a Democrat in the White House in 2009 and the same in 2021. And I don't begrudge Obama or Biden for the priorities they chose instead of immigration. They were both very, very, very important. But that's not lost on the voter. You guys talk a good game. You never fix this shit. So I may not like walls and family separation and kids in cages and all the other crazy shit that Trump does, but if he's the only guy offering change and taking us seriously and showing up and visiting the border, okay, I guess I'm going to vote for him. So should not be a surprise to us that we lost so many voters in Maverick County and the Rio Grande Valley and El Paso, Texas, my hometown. El Paso, Texas, which saw a Trump-inspired shooter come and murder 23 people and said he was coming to repel the invasion of Hispanics who were taking over our country. Trump still won more voters in 2024 than he did in 2020 or 2016. So you're absolutely right. We got to listen to people, and we can't tell them not to trust their lying eyes on price increases, on a border that is out of control. Or one of the things I learned as somebody who often talks about democracy is, I know what I'm talking about when I talk about democracy. It's the right to vote and to freely and fairly choose a person who represents you and my love of this country and 249 years of history, and are we really going to fucking blow it? But for someone for whom this country has not been working, they're making $7.25 an hour, or they're a young person who has heard us talk about school shootings and more than 2 years after Uvalde, nothing has changed, or you name it, it's not working out for them in their lives. Are you, the Democrats, defending everything as it exists, these institutions, including quote unquote democracy? So people still want change. I know that from visiting all these communities. Democrats better offer it. And to your point, it better reflect what they are hearing in these town hall meetings. Let the people define the message. It doesn't mean you change your core convictions or what you believe. It just means that you reflect those people that you want to serve. And the only way you're going to do that is by showing up. And man, it is hard. Texas is a big state. It took me 2 years to cover 254 counties. But if you're serious about winning places like that, I think it's the only way to do it.
In Texas, you mentioned your 2018 race. You came so close from 2018 to 2024. The state seemed like it moved to the right. It seemed like it was moving to the left, and then it moved back to the right. Where do you think the situation stands right now, and how big of a reach do you think the Senate race is in 2026 for Democrats?
I mentioned some of those transformative changes that took place in 2018, including at the local level. Houston, Texas, most diverse city in the country. 17 black women in that year won election to judicial positions. That was not lost on Republicans in power in the state legislature and in the governor's mansion. They almost immediately began changing the voting laws to make it harder and harder for people to cast a ballot, closing hundreds of polling places, almost all of them in the fastest growing black and brown districts, changing the rules on mail-in voting. So when I ran for governor in 2022 during the primary, 13% of the ballots cast by mail in the wake of the deadliest pandemic this country has ever seen, 13% were rejected. 13 out of every 100. That's a banana republic. That's not a modern democracy. Guess what happens when 13 out of every 100 ballots are rejected? People stop voting come November. 9 million registered voters in Texas, with Uvalde and the most obscene abortion ban in America and a power failure in the energy capital of the world that killed 700 Texans, didn't vote. It's not that they didn't care. It's not that they don't love this democracy. It's just that they didn't think that this thing worked anymore. So I'm kind of laying the groundwork for the answer. It is a very challenging environment, exacerbated by the ratio of what Republicans can spend. I raised $80 million in the governor's race, a record for a gubernatorial candidate. On the Democratic side, Greg Abbott spent $130 million, plus what Dan Patrick, plus what Ken Paxton, plus what every other statewide elected Republican, plus the independent expenditures that come in. So, this party cannot be won by the people of Texas alone. We are doing a mighty job with what we have. But we need the party and the country as a whole to see its future in our state and to invest appropriately. In 2032, which will be on us before we know it, Texas will likely have 44 electoral college votes as population continues to move from other parts of the country to our state. You, the Democratic nominee, could win every one of the blue wall states in that year, and you will still lose the White House if you cannot pick up Texas. So investing now is important for whoever the nominee is against Ken Paxton or John Cornyn, but it's also important to continue to build the infrastructure, the bench, and the wherewithal to win elections down the road, especially when the only path to the White House is going to run through Texas.
What are the chances that the nominee against Ken Paxton or John Cornyn is you?
I don't know. I really like what I'm doing right now. It's nice not to be a candidate, to be at these town hall meetings and not say, at the end of it, now I need you to vote for me or sign up for my campaign, but really to hold this conversation and for everyone to listen to one another. And then with Powered by People, our group, to recruit volunteers to do the voter registration and voter organizing and voter turnout work. But I'm also not afraid of, serving as a candidate. But I only want to do it if it's the right thing to do, if it's right for the people of Texas, if it's the best way for us to win political power and then to be able to deliver on that. And that's a question I can't answer right now. Perhaps as I continue to travel the state, I'll know more, but we don't suffer from a lack of talent in the state. I mean, we've got extraordinary leaders in and out of office right now. So I'm not too concerned about that. And the filing deadline is not until December. So we've got a lot of time. Yeah.
What's the most important lesson you've learned from running all those races in Texas that maybe surprised you that you didn't think about before?
Well, you got to show up.
Yeah.
And we did it in 2017 when we first ran. We had a snowball's chance. And no one had ever heard of me, and Ted Cruz was the runner-up against Donald Trump for the Republican presidential primary. He had more money than God. Name recognition was at 100%. I couldn't get a professional political person in Texas to return my phone call. Seriously. I mean, I can't tell you how many messages I left. It was just a lost cause. And everyone was also dispirited because Trump had just won in 2016. The few folks who did call me back said, hey, I'm out of gas. I gave it all for Hillary. I can't do another heartbreaker. So I'm sorry. We turned a necessity, no money, no name ID, no path, into a virtue. And that begat the 254 county campaign. I learned so much as a candidate. I grew so much as a human being. We got so close. And Jon, some part of me still thinks we won. I on the eve of that thing, I just felt it. I'm not the kind of person who counts my chickens before they're hatched. I just knew it. And it was one of the hardest calls I've ever made to call Senator Cruz on election night and to concede to him, but it was the right thing to do. He and Trump and others might learn something from that. But showing up is what got us there. And being honest with people, again, virtue out of a necessity, no money to poll test or to focus group or to get pointers from a consultant. You had to listen from people, learn from them, reflect that back on the campaign trail. And there was a real magic in that. And it is how I won my election for Congress in the first place. It's how I won my election for city council. So all those lessons hold true. But I think when we're talking about power and being honest with ourselves and actually winning and not just feeling good about the way that we run, it cannot just be a Colin Allred or a Beto O'Rourke or a Wendy Davis, just to pick three of the last statewide nominees. You need a full ticket for every position statewide. You need every state house seat contested because those votes will flow up just the same way that they flow down. You need county commissioners and justices of the peace. You really need to be doing this everywhere, all at once. And I really believe if we do that in Texas, we're going to win those positions up and down the ballot. And who knows what will happen in 2026? But given the crises that you and I just discussed that are hitting people in Texas probably harder than almost any other part of the country, there is an opening. And if it's Ken Paxton, twice indicted, recently under FBI investigation, impeached by a Republican majority state house in the state of Texas, he's wildly popular with the most extreme element of the Republican Party and not a whole bunch else. Golden opportunity, but we have to hit on all cylinders in every county, on every position of the ballot. So I learned that from the races that I have run and lost. You can't just have one person out there. You can't have a few people out there. It's got to be everyone, everywhere, in every county.
Beto, as always, your energy and optimism is infectious. I am so grateful that you're out there doing the hard work of registering voters and going to all those town halls. Wish there were more Betos in more states. Thanks for stopping by. It's great talking to you.
Thank you.
All right, if you like that conversation and if you agreed with me and Beto that the party has to reach a lot more people and we have to break through all the noise, especially all the noise from the right-wing media, please subscribe to the Pod Save America YouTube channel. It's very easy. You can just hit the subscribe button. It helps us do what we do. It helps us reach more people, and it helps make sure that a lot more people are getting good information from folks like us as opposed to all the trash that they get from the right wing. So please subscribe to the Pod Save America YouTube channel. Thanks, everyone.